Hello. I'll give you a moment to absorb the fringe. That's new. And she's bigger. And she wanted to say hi. Because she's just woken up, so she's going to bother me the entire way through this video. Aren't you? Yes. It's quite enough of that. I'm going to talk to you about the 5 books that I finished in October. We were kind of all over the place this month. Still feeling a bit meh about reading. To be honest, all of September and all of October I have been pretty shit, just mentally anyway. So reading was really a very low priority, and I had very low tolerance for anything that wasn't absolutely fantastic. So some of these ratings, maybe I would go back and bump them up a little bit, but we'll get to that. I started the month off with A Master of Gin by P. Jelly Clark. It was his first debut novel. That means the same thing. It was his debut novel. He's well known for doing short stories, and I have loved his short stories before. I think he's an incredibly talented writer. I really enjoyed The Dead Cattail Assassins. I thought that was really clever. And everyone has said really good things about A Master of Gin, so I wanted to give it a go. This was really mid for me. The real strengths of this book are the world building. It is set in Cairo in a kind of gas lampy, like 20s, 30s kind of time. Great. I love that time period, particularly with like fantasy, historical mystery vibes, like that combination of characteristics. I thought that was executed really well. I did like most of the characters. I thought it was a really interesting concept, and I think overall the world building was the strength in this book. Unfortunately, the plot just really didn't hit for me. I felt it was very like, okay, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, because this is how mystery books work, and these are the steps that we need to hit in this order for it to all work and make sense. And that didn't hit for me. There were also a lot of characters who are like secondary or tertiary characters that felt very similar to each other. I had a hard time keeping them like apart in my head. I struggle with picturing characters anyway. I think it's part of the autism thing. I'm just like abstract concepts like characters and what they look like in my head. I'm not good at that. So having that many secondary and tertiary characters, some were quite similar names who only popped up in certain circumstances, and I couldn't remember where we'd seen them before, and it wasn't necessarily explained. So maybe that's part of like, maybe that's mostly a me problem, but I did really struggle with that. I also felt with some of the plot points, they were quite convenient. There wasn't enough foreshadowing for me to go, oh my God, of course, it's for this reason, or it's this person doing this. And I think overall there was a lot of backstory that I think I could have done with like a flashback or a prologue or something, just to solidify it more, so that when it came to that plot point being relevant further on in the book, it felt less convenient and less like, oh fuck it, this is where this goes. Like, surprise bit of information that suddenly ties all these bits together. Like, it felt just a bit convenient, I think. It's certainly for some people. I just don't think it's necessarily for me, and I think that's okay. Yeah, I rated it a 3.25, which isn't a bad rating. Just for the people that think 3 is a bad rating. Like, it's not bad, it just wasn't amazing. I did enjoy some elements of this book. Next was a 5-star. I read Garlic and the Witch, which is the sequel to... Sorry, I can't stop fiddling with this fringe. I don't care if I can't see it, but I can see it all the time. Anyway, I read Garlic and the Witch. It's the sequel to Garlic and the Vampire, which is just a gorgeously cute graphic novel. And I know people chuck around the term cozy fantasy quite a lot, but this is cozy fantasy. It's about an anxious bulb of garlic taking on more responsibility in this witch's vegetable patch. Like, I don't know how you can get lower stakes than that, and it's just beautiful art. I love like how stylized it is, and it's just so easy to read, and it's like a lovely bath for my brain, this kind of thing. I think this is the only... Like, there are only 2 books in this series, which makes me sad, because I could read one of these every day and I think that would cure my mental health problems. Highly recommend if you have not picked up Garlic and the Witch or Garlic and the Vampire before. You can kind of read them out of order, like it wouldn't make too much confusion, but the vampire one does come first. Then a complete change of pace. I read Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, and I don't think I can say that I liked this book, but I could not stop thinking about it after I read it. I listened to the audiobook, which is, I think, that I don't think I could have absorbed this any other way. This is about a woman in the 60s, or is it 70s? I think it's the 60s, who gets sucked back in time and ends up saving this black woman in the 60s. That is relevant because she goes back in time and ends up saving this white boy from drowning and gets a gun in her face for her trouble and then she pops back into her own time. And it's about her relationship with this boy from the past and the fact that she keeps ending up in the past, working out why this is happening, having to adjust to living on a slave plantation and adjusting to the just like wild differences between 70s and like the 18 something or others. This does not shy away from any topic. It talks about everything in depth. No, that's a lie. It doesn't shy away from anything. There's Octavia E. Butler's writing is very like stark and simple and gets the point across like a punch to the face, and it is just so hard to read in some places because they talk about all the horrific things that happened to slaves, and in some places still happen to slaves, just like it was a normal part of life, because it was back then. And that framing is devastating. Like it's a really, really hard book to read, but it is incredibly well written, and there's a reason this book is so renowned and lauded. Very, very hard to read, but glad I did. Would recommend if you have a heart of stone or are prepared to read about some of the really horrific things. There are so many trigger warnings for this book. Then I read The Waking of Angantyr, I think is how you say it, by Marie Brennan. This is the same lady who wrote A Natural History of Dragons, which is the series that I absolutely devoured in 2023. I didn't realise she had written other books, completely naively. So when I saw this, I picked it up. Obviously, it's about Vikings. It's about a shield maiden. She's not a shield maiden. She's a bondswoman. I think bondswoman is the term. Who breaks away from the homestead place where she is living and ends up running away after an incident. And it's about her finding herself and who she is and exploring some of the parts of this bit of Scandinavia. It is fantasy. We dive into a bit of like Norse folklore and mythology, and there's a lot of very accurate portrayals of Vikings because Marie Brennan did a degree in this area of history. And it says so, I can't remember if it's in the acknowledgements or like there's a note at the beginning, or it's like dedicated to her, I want to say anthropology professor, because she's had to take away, like change the spellings, the authentic spellings, because no one would be able to pronounce them if they didn't have that knowledge already, which I found quite funny. But I think there's a note in the back that explains that this is like a bastardization of her thesis for the degree she did, and I found that really interesting. I think you can tell at times because there were some elements that weren't quite as strong for me. I didn't really enjoy it past the halfway point. If I had a real bee in my bonnet about finishing books at this point, otherwise I would have DNF'd it because I felt like I'd DNF'd enough books this month. I was really interested in the beginning, and then it just sort of tapered off because for me the various like little acts within the book didn't feel very connected, and that didn't get explained until right at the end. So I just didn't understand why we were doing the things we were doing, why we were going to the places we were going, and I just didn't really understand her motivations through the first like chunk of the book. So I got really sick of it. Basically, like I had no real reason, like I couldn't understand why we were doing the things we were doing, and that lost my interest completely. So it's not the best thing she's ever written. I find it quite interesting because I've also read Mask of Mirrors, which she co-wrote with somebody under another name. And while I really enjoyed the first book in that trilogy, I thought it was really complex and I thought the world building was really good, I could not get through the second. This is not a series, but I also didn't enjoy this as much, so I'm now wondering if she was kind of a one-hit wonder for me, if A Natural History of Dragons, that whole series, like that was a 5-star series for me. I'm wondering if there's nothing else she can do to match that or beat it, which is sad because I really enjoyed that. But it's also a chunky book. This is a chunky book. It's nearly 500 pages, it's just under 500 pages, and I just think it was a bit long. Like there were bits that could have been chopped out. There were bits that could have been, like there was, the ending went on forever. Just forever. And I don't think it needed to do that. Personally, I think we could have wrapped that up a bit quicker. Anyway, didn't love this. Surprised I finished it. Moving on. The last book I read this month was Eric by Terry Pratchett. Sometimes I get George to pick out what I want to read, what I should be reading next, because I don't want to have to pick. And he picked Eric for me, which is less than 200 pages. It's really small. I think it's aimed at young adults. It was kind of written that way. I'm not really sure. And I've already forgotten what it's about. Eric, this random dude, tries to summon a demon or a jinni or someone to grant him 3 wishes. And instead he summons Rincewind from whatever the fuck he was doing in these other planes of existence and his luggage. And it's about the hijinks they get up to with Rincewind trying to convince Eric that he's not able to grant him wishes, but he is still a wizard, so he can still do weird stuff. And there's like the Prince of Hell that is involved at some point. And I didn't love the other Rincewind book that I read, which was The Colour of Magic. So now I'm just wondering if I just don't like Rincewind stories, because I just didn't love this one. I thought it was a bit convoluted. There were a couple of funny bits here and there. I didn't really enjoy any of the characters. So far, the only series I'm really, really loving in the Pratchett world are the Witches and the Guards. And I think that's because they follow structures that I'm familiar with, because the Guards novels are just crime novels and the Witches ones are just takes on fairy tales that I already understand. So I'm wondering if that's why they work for me, because although I've read others, I've read some Moist von Lipwig books and the Death books. Some of those are okay, but they don't hit like Witches and Guards. I'm going to keep reading them. Like, I'm not going to not read Pratchett until I've read them all. But this one just didn't hit as much. And that is where we're at. And I think 5 books is pretty tidy. If you're curious about what I DNF this month, let me sum it up for you really quickly. Oh, quite a few. I DNF'd Dragon Rider by Taran Mataru because I just didn't like any of the characters, and I think I'm done with epic fantasy in that respect. The like big sprawling, I think those stories have been done. I have yet to find anything new, and it wasn't giving me anything new. I DNF'd The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon because I just don't like romance. I don't know why I tried this. I do know why I tried this. It's because a lot of my mutuals really love it. I just don't like romance. It really irritates me. I DNF'd Vagabonds by Lagosa Osunde. I just found it really difficult to read because I'm not very good with literary fiction / magical realism, and my brain wasn't in the right place. This is probably a soft DNF. I might pick it up in the future. I was interested in the concept. I just found it quite tough to get into. I DNF'd This Is How You Lose the Time War. Again, romance, just not for me. I tried it twice this month and I just need to learn. It's just not for me. And then I DNF'd The Little Old Lady Who Broke All the Rules. This was a charity shop random pickup and it just wasn't interesting enough. I wanted it to be Richard Osman and it wasn't Richard Osman, is basically where I'm at with this one. And then I also DNF'd Night and Day by John Connolly, which is a spooky anthology that is coming out, I think, Halloween, which I got an arc of, which is really lovely, but I'm just really struggling with anthologies at the moment, so this is just going away for now. I'm not forcing myself to read it, and I'll pick it up when I'm not feeling so shit about reading, because I need a little bit more brain power to get me through that, is where I'm at. So that was everything I read or did not read in October. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if that's your jam, and I will see you in the next video.